Evening, everybody. So, doing things a little differently this week. We are not actually live right now. We are recording this. I guess
Dead.
this would
We're
be.
recording this dead.
Yeah. hmm Sorry, hate to break it to you this way, but yeah, no. But yeah, we're recording this on Monday because I will be busy tomorrow evening. Um, but since we had to cancel just 2 weeks ago, I didn't want to have to cancel again, so we're just pre-recording it, and then it'll be streaming live, I guess tonight or whenever it is you're watching it. So, but but yeah, so you please still feel free to leave comments. Like I said, we won't be responding to them live. Me and Matt may or may not be able to be kind of passively or
Yeah.
actively maybe watching the stream when we do it. So if people are commenting, we may or may not be able to respond in real time. But just so you know, us in video form will not be responding to your comments because they don't exist yet. So, all
That's
right.
there's a
Now we
lot
got
of technology that reveals like physics truth. It's
mm,
like we're recording it now, it's gonna play in the future. That's kind of what happens when like light travels through outer space. Like
yeah. Because
uh
really,
the
every
sun the
time,
sun will be played by the sun 8 minutes ago.
yeah, 'cause even when we're live streaming, where it's being viewed in the future from when we said the things and moved around awkwardly.
But we're able to respond in our present.
Whoa! All right. Well, I guess before we kick it off, what are you drinking tonight?
I am drinking hop juju.
Ooh, sounds fun.
Yeah.
Who's that by?
Uh, Fatheads Brewery.
Uh,
It's a seasonal. It's
mhm.
very good, and for some reason, the alcohol content, which is 9%, hits harder, and I
Ooh,
think it's all the terpenes in the hops
ah,
because
mm,
it's hop heavy for sure.
that'll do it. So I'm also drinking something hoppy tonight. Surprise, surprise. The other Cincinnati local Taft's Gavel Banger IPA. So yeah,
They've
and
been changing their
also
labels a lot lately.
yeah, they have. But I mean, the beer's still good, so
Yeah,
that's what matters.
I don't think it's the label. I think it's their marketing.
Hmm.
It just
Yeah,
it doesn't seem to get pushed a lot.
yeah, which is a shame. But
They'll be all right.
mhm.
They make a crap ton of money from their brew pub location.
Yeah, yeah. And else, I mean, notice no, we did not plan the two of us wearing green shirts tonight, but
Yours doesn't look green to me, but I'm kind of red green colorblind.
uh,
Yours looks gray to me.
yeah, it might be the lighting in here is a little more on the blue end, so it made things look a little more gray. All right, well, I guess without further ado, we'll get this thingy started. What do you say?
Okay. Hello, and welcome to the Humanity Podcast, where we do the things with the stuff for the people. I am Matt.
And I'm Tommy. And tonight, as I mentioned before, we are not live; we're pre-recording. But the topic for this evening is actually our very first audience recommendation that we're doing, recommended by my buddy Keith Davis, someone who used to work with lived up in Columbus about 10 years ago now. Jeez. Anyway,
Your audio is acting weird, by the way.
could you hear what I said at all?
A little bit.
A little bit.
Yeah, it's
So
better now.
should I repeat all of that then?
Sure.
Okay. Uh, I'm Tommy. Like I said earlier, this is pre-recorded, so still feel free to leave your comments, but we'll get to them when we can. But tonight, our topic is our very first audience recommended topic. It's by my buddy Keith Davis, someone I worked with when I lived in Columbus, what is 10 years ago now, which seems absurd, but so he was curious about our thoughts. Like, so he's a Christian, but he wanted to know our thoughts as atheists on things like the book of Revelation and how it's looking like some end time stuff has been happening. Apparently, some people think how different current events seem to be mapping with like biblical prophecy and whatnot. So I was like, that is a fantastic idea, my man. So here we are.
Here we are.
Hmm.
Hey, I have a quick question.
Hmm.
Inside baseball on our end.
Hmm.
I'm seeing a title at the top of this that says Jainism. What is it? Part one. That's not your title, is it?
No,
Okay, that's not going to show up anywhere when this goes live. Well,
no.
okay.
I'll change the title. I think that's from Jimmy's
Yeah.
show.
Okay. I didn't think it was, but I thought I should mention it. This could also probably have been done in the private chat.
That's all right. That's all right.
um.
Because even though this is pre-recorded, now this we still have that sort of live feel to it.
Yeah, it's still live for us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um.
Yep.
Yeah. So no, that's good. In fact, I guess I had been removed enough from the Christian world that like when I heard there was an eclipse coming, like
Mm-hmm.
end times didn't didn't even. I was just like, oh, eclipses are neat. And then when somebody, I think maybe it was you. I don't even think it showed up in my YouTube feed. You're just like, oh, people are flipping out about where the eclipse is going to
Mm-hmm.
travel across the
Mm-hmm.
planet and the U.S. And I was like, oh yeah, that's a thing. I
Yeah.
don't miss that.
Yeah. But speaking of which, that's a perfect segue into our little current event segment, which is connected to the main topic for the evening. But yes, the eclipse coming up as of when we're recording this, a week from today, April 8th. There'll be the total solar eclipse passing over the United States, parts of Canada, probably and probably other places too. But apparently, America is the United States of America anyway is the only part that actually matters. So, so speaking of the sort of hysteria, and like, yes, it was me who mentioned uh, this to you. So I wanted to start by just showing this post. Maybe you've seen you, the viewer. Maybe you've seen this floating around on Facebook. I've seen at least a couple people posting and talking about how like apparently the combination of like the path of this eclipse and like previous eclipses like all means something. So
Yeah, it
let's
means
take a look.
math. That's what it means.
Yeah, math, physics is like how I like to say like everything happens for a reason. Physics. So let's take a look at this post here. Let me get rid of that. Yeah, that's kind of small. Let me make that a little bigger. Yeah, it's bigger anyway. All right, so let's see here. So I don't know. Yeah, people can see my mouse. So this line here, this is the eclipse that's coming up next week here in 2024.
That's going from like Mexico up
Hmm.
through Southwest up to Maine.
Yeah, and then like parts of Canada. Um,
They don't
I don't
count.
know.
It doesn't like counts when it hits Maine again.
I mean, where it's going, I don't know if that's going to hit like Greenland eventually up there, but and then this part, I think this was the last total eclipse back in 2017.
Yeah, that makes sense because it wasn't very dark here. It was creepy, like
Yeah.
somebody moved the sun, but
Mhm. And then this was, I guess, just last year. There was a annular eclipse, which is slightly different than a total eclipse. So going across like kind of like the west, southwest of the U.S. from Texas, um, and then I think this one up here in Canada that was from another annular solar eclipse so back in 2021.
when you lean back, I think you're losing connection with your laptop a little bit. You shouldn't, but
Hmm.
Yeah,
Losing connection, like
I don't know,
sound.
like the your microphone audio is a little weak. It could just be on my end, and everybody else is like, "What's wrong with Matt? He has broken shit." And
Here, going to try to adjust something real quick and hope it doesn't kill everything. So,
okay, I'll fill a few seconds. I found this on the
sweet.
floor earlier. It's my daughter's little dollhouse. I want to say it's gin and strawberries. So
Hmm.
it's a yeah,
Hmm.
little
Hmm.
dollhouse drink thing. I have it. I have it next to my drink.
Ooh, nice. All right. So I'm back. Hopefully, back for better or something here. All right. All right. So this person making the post, like,
Do I know this person, by the way?
no, this was like I saw it was a post that was shared by a friend of mine, like someone else. I don't think you know this person either, but I was, but yeah, it was something that somebody posted in a group somewhere. So first, they're making a big deal about how, like, because I remember even our pastor Brian at Crossroads back when the first eclipse happened, he made notes like the next one's going to come and make this path, and they were even then making this big deal about all these eclipses making a big X across the United States. What does that mean? That's got to mean something, right? It's like, all right, so one of the first things, or one of the main things they were pointing out. But first, I guess it's going over several cities of a certain name that they wanted to point out that to them was very significant. So first, I wanted to make sure people notice if you can see like the path of this eclipse. Just a couple places to take note of. You kind of barely see it, but you see right here, it's completely going over Lake Erie, right here on the north edge of Ohio, and just the very northwest tip of Pennsylvania.
Just a tip.
So just the tip. Pay attention right there. So I'll go a couple pages later. They're making this big deal about how it's passing over something like several different cities named Nineveh. And it has a marked on the map here. Now, if you'll notice, like the path that it traces to get here, here's Lake Erie, completely uncovered. And it's going through like most of Pennsylvania just so they can catch that little Nineveh, Pennsylvania right here at the bottom. It's like, okay,
So that's not even really the path of it.
yeah, so that's one of the first things that tipped me off about this post. They're like, this might be like more bullshit than normal. So I'm like, okay, that's, and
Wait,
then let's,
I no, you never mind. Something popped in my head, and I'm like, I gotta say it now. I don't have to say it now. I'll say it in a few minutes.
oh, that's okay. You can go ahead. I was about to transition to a different part of the post. So,
Oh, okay. Um, all right. Russia is extremely good at signals intelligence. They started being amazing at it 100 years ago, and they're especially good at misinformation and using misinformation and disinformation to manipulate people, manipulate groups of people, and religious folks who are into loose prophecies and all that kind of stuff, where they're like, "Oh, look at this specific thing it says," and it says something kind of vague. Um,
mm-hmm,
it's like an ink blot thing, basically. Russia puts out an ink blot, and people are like, "Oh, it means this." And so, this
mm-hmm,
original post, or like this kind of stuff, where it kind of tweaks reality a little bit to gin up any group in the United States that Russia can gin up to create division between them and another group. That's their whole deal. Is they don't have the resources to really cause significant real world problems, so let's cause imaginary problems and get people to think they're real.
right. Mm-hmm,
Uh, yeah, so that's what, like, the shifting of the line of the eclipse and stuff. That feels very propaganda ish, where
mm-hmm.
you're like, that's almost true. Let's tweak it so it's awesome for us. Like,
Yeah. Oh, I saw someone commented on when one of the places I saw this posted. Someone says, "Well, it apparently also is going to pass over three different cities in the United States called Paris. Does this mean we all need to buy baguettes?"
and look at all the places where Nineveh is named. It's all like they had to draw the line around cities basically and into podunk towns, like
Mm,
like East Armpit of like every area they went through. You know, it's like there's a bunch of Nazareths and Bethlehems and yeah, anywhere that's like
mhm,
historically very religious, which is rural areas. Lately in the U.S. anyway.
yeah.
Yeah, then
Because they also made a big deal about it. Like, I don't know if people can see, but right here they have labeled where the Ark encounter is in Kentucky. You know, Ken Ham's little amusement park, whatever.
how much you want to bet his people put this out? Because you know, like it wouldn't cross over that if they hadn't shifted it at all. It would not be anywhere near like the middle of the X.
Yeah, which and that's the other thing because they make a big deal about how it's close to the middle. Like, but it's not in the middle. Like, God couldn't have like gave us a sign like with that like actually in the middle. Like
Yeah.
he was this close.
No, but man, see, God has to do sloppy work because then we have to have faith. Like, if there was evidence, it wouldn't be faith, right?
Good drink.
And so we need to have faith for all the things unseen. We need to be certain about the unseen things that don't have proof. And that's what will save everybody.
Yeah.
Also, it's also what kills everybody.
Yes. Except this is also proof. Apparently.
Yeah.
All this stuff, it's both completely clear and mysterious because it needs to be all at the same time. It's
Yeah,
almost it's all
it's
made up.
totally clear when whoever's talking about it needs something clear, and totally mysterious when they are trying to avoid some kind of conclusion they don't want to have.
Exactly. So, yeah. So one of the other things they were talking about. Let's see.
By the
There's
way, that is an anarchy symbol.
yeah. Here, let me.
Maybe God's like, maybe
No, no, that's not.
God's just like, it just plunged the U.S. into anarchy. I do decree.
Yeah. So, all right, 'cause that's what I saw. But in this part of the post, they made a point how it's looking like the Hebrew letters Tav and Aleph, which are like the first and last letters of the Hebrew alphabet. So they're drawing the connections with the whole like Alpha and Omega thing.
They're
Because
also
of course,
extremely simple symbols that you could find by looking pretty much anywhere around the room you're in right now.
right? But except it really only has the Aleph. Like that's like it, now if there was like an Aleph here and then another X like shape looking like a Tav somewhere else.
Oh yeah, you got to portion out part of the aleph to get the tav.
Yeah. So yeah, this is just an Aleph, and they're saying, but it's also a Tav in there because like first of all, like when people like
It's also a triangle. It's the Trinity. Oh, it's also a less than sign. It's also an
ooh,
angle measurement. Like
you know, are we bisecting here? I think that's what we're
yeah.
So yeah, so it's just I mean, first of all, like anything that looks like an X or a cross, which a lot of people will find like just finding two intersecting lines, like you can find that everywhere.
And that's
So
probably not where how Jesus was crucified if he was crucified if he was real. Like it was
right.
probably cuz they just did it wherever they had scrap wood or
Mhm.
you know what I mean? So it was probably a pole or it was probably a T shape.
Yeah,
Uh,
like a capital T.
yeah,
Yeah,
because
because I
it's
think
way
they added
easier to
the
build one of those.
yeah. But also, I think they added that little part at the top because the in the Gospels where it talks about them having like the sign above his head. So I think someone's like, "Oh, we got to have a place to put the sign." So boom.
Yeah, but then a pole makes more sense because it's a simpler thing.
Hmm.
Like it would be easier to carry your still super difficult, but easier to carry the lumber for your own cross.
Hmm.
Uh, Not like in the Passion of the Christ where a dude cannot carry something that big. There's no fucking way.
Yeah, yeah. But side tangent on this side tangent. Highly recommend the YouTube channel Emma Thorne. Just recently
Oh
put up
yeah.
a video where she watched AI generated Easter cartoons. So if
Oh
you want
yeah.
to see some interesting cross shapes,
Yeah,
that was
and
fantastic.
yeah, I did appreciate her take at the beginning of that too because she has a
Mm.
background in effects, visual
Mhm.
effects editing,
Yeah.
like in the actual industry, and uh, although she hasn't said what movies she worked on. Maybe she
Yeah.
doesn't want to brag. I don't know.
Yeah. That could be.
Her
It could
stuff
be.
is her stuff is just funny. Tends to be kind of lighthearted, even when she's ripping on people.
Oh yeah. Lever channel. So yeah. So but yeah, but you said earlier, like really like the shape I see here is like the big anarchy A.
Yeah.
So does that mean we should all become anarchists now? It's like, do I need to revert to my
All
old
right.
ways? But
So so this thing about how like eclipses pass over the United States and all that, it kind of reminds me of it reminds me of how there's like a global north and a global south, and um,
mhm.
I don't know. Conservatives are kind of upset about that because I don't know they own the rights to the awesome South or something. I don't. Whatever.
Yeah.
Um, but the way the Earth goes around the sun and the way it is on its axis and stuff, the reason why more the reason why nations prospered faster in the northern hemisphere had to do with the weather and how it tilts towards the sun and uh, like growing seasons. Like just all kinds of stuff. Also, most of the landmass on the planet is like in the northern hemisphere, so it
Hmm.
just makes sense that first of all that like a solar eclipse is if it hits land, it's gonna be in the northern hemisphere, and you have two options. You have like Eurasia or North America. Like, so the fact that like
Yeah.
when it hits land, it hits like one of those two places more often than anywhere else. But I don't even know if that's a fact. Um, just yeah, so it's not surprising that like just this is the way things are shaped. It's the geometry of our solar system and the Earth and the Moon, and it is really weird that we get a full eclipse. Um,
Hmm.
that is unusual. That's mathematically kind of unique because
Yeah.
everything is the right distance. But we will probably find at some point that that is also because of math. Like the reason why that works so
Mhm.
well is because math doesn't have remainders typically in in science. It's not like when do we do it? This three. Like it's not like the universe just makes like something shaped like a three and just puts it out there.
Oh, geez. Oh, yeah. So, but something else I wanted to point out on this map here. So there's, like I said, so they're making a big deal about like these three paths, but
Yeah, what is that up the top?
apparently this part in Canada, like that apparently doesn't mean anything. Like this was, let's see, that was
Looks like a
back
big.
in 2021. That was another annular eclipse that was just up there. So I don't. I guess
It
like
was
screw
just up
Canada.
there. Like it
Yeah.
didn't. It wait. So it went and then like backed off.
Yeah, maybe that's at the point where like the moon like shifted. I don't know how that works, but apparently it
Oh,
doesn't. Apparently it doesn't mean anything because it doesn't fit whatever narrative this person was
it
trying to
is
tell.
bigger though. A
Hmm.
lot bigger. Like
Yeah,
the area it affected.
yeah, much
But
wider
that, but that's
sway.
French Canada. French Canada can't be part of prophecies. I mean, because France was where Mary Magdalene maybe probably went and preached. And
And the less said about that, the better. Apparently,
yeah,
so.
because that means she talked in churches, and Paul said that wasn't okay. So she must have gone bad at some point,
Hmm.
even though like she was totally full of the Jesus semen. You did not see that coming, did you? That's what Jesus said.
But she did apparently.
Yeah,
He came in power. Really,
yeah.
filled
For
her up.
some reason, I just picture at that moment he just puts his forms fists, puts them on his hips, does like a double teapot, and goes, "Ha ha!"
Yes, that is probably exactly how Jesus climaxes. Yep.
There will be
Uh,
multiple entendres.
just in case we didn't punch our tickets to hell last week, just making sure we get that done. All right. So just a
Wow.
couple other things on this post I wanted to touch on. So yeah. So here's the post itself. Here, I'll try to see if I can make that. See if I can make that bigger. That's what somebody said. Um, is that that's the same? Yeah. So you probably can't really see this, but yeah, it's by this.
Oh, what is that? The horseman at the top? That was
Oh, it's this was
that
the Facebook
the
group
reindeer
it's posted
pulling the
to. Yeah,
moon. What?
prophecies, words, and fulfillment for this season. Yes. I don't know. That's way too many horses for the apocalypse. I don't know what's going on there.
Yeah, that's what happens when you have AI make your banner.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know how well people can read this, but I love how like the title of the post is like it's all caps except for one word. So it's like a sign for America to repent question mark and then quotation mark important info exclamation point and then no close quotes. So let's see, is there something at the end of the post? Like nope, just no close quotes. Oh wait, there is. No, that's wait, that's just another quote. This person has no idea what they're doing punctuation wise, but
I, do you think we're gonna find that there's like some kind of like subclinical schizophrenia in that, like once you get super religious about prophecies, that like you get into like seeing boogeymen where there aren't? Like,
mm-hmm.
well, I do have a feeling that a lot of people who are especially susceptible to this do have mental health problems or
Quite possible.
anxiety or like just. I haven't found anybody who was especially chill who was like, "Yeah, this is gonna happen."
Yeah. So yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. But I guess I mean, how can you be chill if this is the kind of stuff you think about? So
Oh yeah,
I don't know how well people can actually read this. Well, you can look up the post, but when they're making the point about all the different like Nineveh towns that it's going through, it says like it's amazing how much America mirrors Nineveh. If you don't see it, you may be part of the problem. I guess I'm part of the problem because they don't actually mention what America is doing to mirror Nineveh. Because if you
that
go to the
part of it where it
Bible,
says if you don't see it might be part of the problem. That is that's clickbaity manipulation stuff, and so that
mhm,
kind of makes me think like whoever wrote this isn't fully on board. 'Cause
mm,
that just sounds like it's a commercial or a
mm,
news program to get you to watch more.
mm.
Or they're just mimicking that. It's hard to tell.
Yeah, I mean, also never mind that all the towns in the U.S. named Nineveh are spelled slightly differently than the one
Of
from the
course they
Bible.
are. It's not
So yeah,
American. If it's not
but
American, we can spell it however we want.
but again, like the post doesn't mention what sins of Nineveh, but like if you go in the Bible, it's usually like sins related to like ultra violence and torture and like cruelty and stuff like that. I'm like,
Well, America's military.
yeah, but
Yeah, like
but also thinking like the crowd that these things are usually from, they're usually pretty pro military and stuff
right.
like that. So it's
Yeah,
like
pro
so
violence in a lot of ways.
yeah, so I don't know what they could be talking about. And where it says like you're part of the problem, it's like I guess apparently I'm like torturing people and like skinning them alive like the Ninevites were, taking prisoners. I I,
Dude,
I missed that, but yeah.
there is really there's awful stuff happening in Gaza right now, and that I have been able to the
Hmm.
only thing that I've been able to make it make sense to me is if and this doesn't just go for
All right.
this isn't just Jewish people. Like if you think you are God's
That's
chosen people,
enough of that for now.
then you can't commit genocide. Like if you're following God's orders, it can't be genocide
Hmm.
or His example or
Yeah.
whatever. Because yeah, there's awful stuff happening in the Middle East, and just no good. And there's stuff
Mhm.
like that happening, and it's kind of like wow. So it's okay if you do it as long as you're either doing it in God's name or you're following the example of someone who said it was in God's name. Then that violence is good. But if you just do it for fun, remember that line, like torturing babies for fun?
No, yeah, that the apologists like to use.
Yeah, it's like, okay, like torturing babies for justice. That's okay.
Well, it's because they.
Hold on, let me turn off my weather radio.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. We're getting another like, potentially fun thing about this evening. Got some severe weather that may be rolling through, so hopefully we stay alive slash retain power. So that could be another fun thing to look out for. Is
there's there's
disappearing.
flood watches and severe thunderstorm things.
Yeah. Well, good thing you're in a basement for
Yeah,
one of those. For one of those things.
that's right. We got a sump pump.
Yeah.
Come and get me, flood part two.
If only we were retreating to the ark. But
If only the one in Kentucky doesn't float.
yeah, and they actually that was one of
Fucking
the
dumb
funniest things.
shits.
Like a couple of years ago, they actually like this was a big story. How the park
Oh
actually
yeah.
they had to submit an insurance claim for storm damage.
No, like
Which
specifically, yeah, it was like flood damage. I mean,
yeah, which I mean, okay, it wasn't the boat; it was just like another part of the park or whatever. But still,
yeah, it was probably the parking lot or something.
yeah, but it was just too good. All right, so anyway, so speaking of terrible things happening around the world,
Nineveh.
that must mean that this is the end times,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or so we hear.
So vodka, if you got it.
Yeah. And I'm gonna try my best to not sound like I'm doing too much like mocking of that idea, but I'm gonna be honest, it's gonna be difficult because
Yeah.
so going back to so my because my friend Keith, who like one of the
Oh, that's great. He's gonna be watching, and I feel bad already. Shit. I've been
no,
trying. I like.
he
I
was
like.
he was not part of the whole like I mean I honestly I don't know what he thinks about the whole eclipse thing, but he's not one of the people I saw like posting about the eclipse and all that.
Yeah.
But because so he was wanting us to talk about things like I'm trying to remember the way he put it about basically about like some current events seem to be kind of tracking along with like what are apparently end times prophecies, whether it's in Revelation or other parts of the Bible. And he just wanted to know like so how do you like atheists, non-believers, like how do you account for all this stuff and what's your explanation? What do you think of it? I mean, because honestly, for me, like the real short version is like I don't really. It's I mean, it can really to me, it's really just as simple as the stuff happening today. Like has nothing to do with any prophecies from the Bible because like all the prophecies that are in the Bible, one, they're either just wrong or and also for the most part they're talking about specific events most of which have already like we've already passed that point in history like so for instance like the book of Revelation most of that's like very much concerned with Rome and things that were either happening in the day it was happening or shortly after like a lot of people think a lot of things in Revelation have to do with like the destruction of the temple by the Romans um, but it is pretty clear from like most scholars, at least that I've heard talk about it, like it seems pretty clear that it's talking about Rome and like Rome is the problem.
Yeah. Other than people who signed, and even this, so there are a lot of biblical scholars who work for like Christian universities or think tanks or whatever, and they have to sign a statement of faith saying that they won't draw any conclusions that contradict the Bible, basically. Um, and so, depending on how much freedom different scholars have, based on who's supporting their research, um, they have more leeway to say that it is about Rome or not. But up until like I think it was the late 1700s, um, I refreshed my memory today by watching some stuff. But up until the late 1700s, definitely in the 1800s, that was when it became kind of like a popular view that Revelation was about the future. Up until that point, like across the board, people thought it was talking about past events. Um,
Hmm.
almost definitely events that were happening when it was written. And the 666 is a numerology thing referring to Nero,
Hmm.
um, because he couldn't say, if it was written contemporary to Nero, he couldn't be like, Nero's the devil and stuff, because he's going to be like, yeah, I know, but like, you're going to die anyway. And so here you go. Let me just,
Uh-huh.
you know, use you as a lamp post or something like they did.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
like this idea that Revelation is about the future is a very recent development, and
Mm.
was popularized by, it was the what's it called? It's like unfolding revelation. What's that called?
I don't know.
Shit.
But I know, like specifically, like the guy, it was like much of what we currently think of things like rapture and like tribulation, whatever eschatology is started by this guy John Nelson Darby, like
That's
back
who I'm
in the
thinking of.
1800s.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Like the
So,
spiritual warfare stuff, and like
mhm. Yeah, he's like the
revelation as
father.
a fortune
Yeah,
telling thing. Yeah,
yeah, he's referred to as like the father of dispensationalism and
that's the word I was trying to think of.
oh, that's okay. Yeah.
And what does that
So
mean?
it means like, I mean, it can mean several things depending on like what context, but it's basically like there's like different dispensations. So basically, like in this time period, there's this dispensation of the Spirit. In this time period, there's a different dispensation. So it's like history is basically divided up into segments where basically like each segment is it's almost like a new set of like spiritual rules. Essentially, okay, here's what's going on in this segment. Okay, now we're in this segment. Now this is how things work. Yeah, it's very
And
like
it's like
complicated and
progressive
complex.
revelation. It's where
Yeah, stuff like that.
like and it progressive revelation like throughout the Bible, even though some of the books are not in the right order
Hmm.
chronologically.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like the further the story goes in the Bible, the more clear the revelation of God is, supposedly. And the
Hmm.
book of Revelation is then, I guess, the clearest, but has a whole lot of what are called like Barnum statements, where it's like the circus guy, um,
Hmm.
P.T. Barnum.
Yeah.
He would make, he was a magician before he did that, and he would make these kind of like general statements that felt specific to the people hearing them.
Yeah. Hmm.
It was just enough specifics that a person's brain would latch on to it. Like, that's about me, and there's quite a lot of that in Revelation, which is why people have been looking at it and saying this is saying the world's going to end like now or next year, and that's been happening for since it was written.
Right. Yeah. And yeah, because like you said, a lot of the things are so general and vague. Is like that's why it looks like so many things today are like mirroring it. Because it's things like when Jesus was talking about like the signs for the end times, like there'll be wars and rumors of wars, and there was like, oh, so like literally,
When hasn't there been?
yeah, or like and all the various like disasters and calamities and things there's always shit happening that matches those
Like
descriptions.
there's plagues,
So,
like we have like cycles of plagues on the planet, and
mhm.
um, yeah,
Oh, but real quick to get back to the whole like Nero as being like what the 666 is referring to, because I remember like be honest, like for me the first time I heard that theory, to me it sounded like just some crazy like numerology conspiracy theory. It's like whatever, but no, apparently that actually is like a really solid thing, because apparently back then it was a thing people did a lot, like with like names and stuff. Like they would give like certain they would give like the numerical value of the letters, so then you could turn yours or someone else's name into a number. Apparently that was just kind of a trendy thing for people to do. um,
it was
but
like a divination thing. Yeah,
yeah, but the thing that really drives it home that that is referring to Nero is, so like the 666, if you do that process to his name, it gives you the number 666. But in the Latin translation of Revelation, the number is actually 616, because Nero's name in Latin, when you do that number process to it, turns out comes out to 616. So like to me that's, and obviously scholars agree, like that's pretty cut and dry. It's like, okay, yeah, this is referring to Nero. So
yeah, and the, like with seven being the number of perfection. and completion, and then 3 being very similar to that in meaning. When you have like a 666, then it's you're emphasizing that this person that it represents is significantly shy of God's perfection, what might look like they're not, or and in that culture, like having like status like he had would mean that you have God's blessing in some way,
Mm.
clearly, because
Hmm. Right.
otherwise, why would God be okay with you being in charge? And
Yeah.
also, another option is maybe God doesn't real.
I mean, that would explain a lot, or remove the need to explain a lot, maybe.
There you go. It kind
Simplify
of does explain a lot too.
things. Hmm.
Answers a lot of questions if you're a Christian or any kind of
Hmm.
monotheist, and you're like, why does this happen? And because if God's good or exists, then why this? And if that kind of being doesn't exist, then it just
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. So that reminds me. So something that happened to me recently that I thought was pretty good illustration of, whether it's things like the eclipse prophecy things that we just discussed, or like when people talk about intelligent design and how things seem so finely tuned, or like looking for any kind of sign, like, oh, everything like happened so perfectly, like this cannot be coincidence, even though that's literally what coincidence means. um, but but people will look for, like, if something like lines seems to line up perfectly, especially if it's in their favor, they're like, oh, this is clearly a sign. So something that I experienced the other day is even kind of eclipse, like sun related. So I was driving somewhere. I think it was in the mornings. Yeah, so I was driving east. So like the sun was like in my face as I'm driving, and I was turning a corner on the highway. Like, for people who are familiar with the Cincinnati area, I was driving on Route 50 into Fort Washington Way. It's basically where like several interstates just like go through downtown. There's like a little like trench like in between some of the streets,
It's
and as
beautiful.
yeah, yeah. So as I was making like the big curve, like entering that section of highway, like I saw where the sun was. I was like, crap. The sun is going to be like right in my face as I'm going through this, because it's like three or four different highways all like intersecting, and like it's across four lanes, and everyone's like weaving in and out all over the place. I was like, crap, the sun's going to be right in my face right as I'm trying to navigate through all this. This is going to suck. But as soon as I turned the corner, there was like one building off to the right that was literally right in the way of the sun from like hitting my eye. So it was like blocking it perfectly. So I like, this is like such a great illustration, because I could very easily like take like the same line of thinking that a lot of Christians or any religious, or basically anyone who looks for like signs or stuff like this, and say, okay, this is just too perfect. Clearly, whoever built that building designed it perfectly so it would be blocking the sun for me, no less. And like the way the road like curves just perfectly, and like the fact that like I'm here right this time of day, right when the sun is right there. It's like, this is too perfect. This cannot be coincidence. This has to be designed. But like, it's very clearly not. you know?
You know what's weird is when like that sounds ridiculous, but then if you blow it up on into like a much bigger scale, at some point it stops being as ridiculous. You know what I mean? Like
Hmm.
for like religious people, Eh,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
it's so weird. It's like the further removed from it you are as a person, like the more believable it is. Like
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and but I think what the other thing about this illustration is, like, because the way it works so well is because it has all the exceptions to it that get ignored, just like in real life. Like, something will happen to somebody that seems so perfect, but they like completely ignore all the times where something like that doesn't happen, or it doesn't happen for someone else. So like, just thinking of all the times I've driven through there or driven anywhere, and there was no building blocking the sun for me, or like, but that of course that didn't mean anything. This one time that it happened, like that was clearly just for me. So, so
No,
yeah,
no, no, not just for you. Everybody else I was going to be driving behind you too.
but only for a short amount of time, because as soon as like the sun went up, then it's like screw those people who are coming through.
Then
But
it's accidents.
or like literally anytime I'm driving, it's like for some reason it's like the with the sun being like right in your view. I don't know what it is, but it seems like it's worse over here on the west side than like any other part of town.
Yeah, for and
Yeah.
74 is terrible for that. Like I
Mhm.
74 because
Yeah.
it leaving Cincinnati, it goes like dead west.
Hmm.
And so during most of the year when the sun is setting and you're driving on 74, you're blinded.
Yeah, or Glenway Avenue, which is one of the main roads I'm close to that I drive on a lot. I mean, Glenway sucks for multiple reasons, but yeah, it seems like no matter what, I'm always driving Glenway straight into the sun, and it's like always like right at the same height as like all the traffic lights, so I can't put my little visor down, or otherwise I can't see the anyway. So,
Yeah,
but
it's really weird
I'm
how
going to
like
ignore all that and just focus on when.
well clearly God doesn't want people going to the west side of Cincinnati at sunset.
I mean, I can't dispute that necessarily. All right, so. But so back to the whole like revelation, like as like prophecy thing. So yeah, so like we said, it seems like most of the people who've actually studied it, and even like actually, like honestly, most people, period, before like just a couple hundred years ago, it seems pretty clear again to most people that like it's not talking about most of the things that I guess particularly evangelicals. I don't know how many other branches of Christianity really get into that whole like end times prophecy stuff. But yeah, it's clearly not talking about what they're trying to make it talk about.
Hmm.
But yeah,
And
so that's so when it so again to answer like my friend Keith's questions, like so what do I make of like current events kind of mirroring Revelation and how that pertains to the end times? And like honestly, like the very short, crude answer is I don't think there's a connection.
yeah, and even like internally in Christian thinking, so like Revelation, I think it was like 400 years after Christianity started was when Revelation like finally became part of the canon.
Yeah,
Um,
and
like up until
barely.
then, it was like depending who you talk to, it was part of it. It wasn't part of it. Some people swore the apostle, John the disciple wrote it. Other people are like, no, it's different John. And then was it Dionysius?
Sure.
I think might have been a historian slash theologian. I don't remember his profession or the correct pronunciation of
The
his name.
pronouncification.
Easy word for me to say. Uh, yeah, he was like one of the first like big name people to say that like it couldn't possibly be the same John because whoever wrote John in Greek wrote very well, and whoever wrote the Book of Revelation, that John had a lot of grammar mistakes,
Yeah.
which could be possible if it's the same John in cognitive decline or a little bit crazy, because he had been in prison. So if it's the same John,
Yeah.
first of all, he'd be super old.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, this it was not written by somebody who was good at Greek, writing Greek. There were grammatical errors, which also makes sense why, like, as an apocalyptic kind of writing, it was kind of sloppy, and there were like it's actually kind of unusual for visions like that, like in the Book of Daniel. There was kind of like a cohesion to how things were written. There was like symbolism that you could easily find in other places in Scripture, or at least it was a motif that was common in the time. And I think part of the reason why people have been able to apply Revelation to kind of any major event was because was because it's so vague. Um,
Yeah.
and as far as the end times, it really looks like Jesus in the Gospels. Jesus thought the end times were when he was living,
Oh yeah.
and like
Hmm.
the end time when the Son of Man comes, which
Hmm.
wouldn't have been him. That's a different person. That would have been like the new King David or something,
Hmm.
because the Messiah was different than the Son of Man in Jewish thinking. So there's like all kinds of stuff that even like if you just take uh, Jewish theological information and project it forward through the New Testament into Revelation, um, because that should have been the playbook they're all working with, since Christianity was kind of like a new sect of Judaism.
Hmm.
Um,
Essentially. Yeah.
it doesn't. It doesn't. They did those ideas don't play well together. Like Jesus said, before your generation passes away, like these
Yeah.
things will happen, and then like New Testament wasn't even written until a generation had passed away. So,
Yeah. Yeah. So let's
except for
talk about.
Paul wrote some things at the tail end of that generation time period. Uh,
Yeah.
but the actual like writings
He was
about
the
Jesus,
earliest writings. Yeah.
yeah, they came after that.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's talk about that whole like failed apocalyptic prophecy aspect of it, because speaking of how like just the book of Revelation was viewed, early on, we talk about putting the canon together. Like the book of Revelation almost didn't make it in.
Yeah, it was like a last minute ad.
Yeah, it was highly debated. Like even like prominent figures like Martin Luther, like thought it should not have been included.
Yeah, and in his German translation, he didn't include it.
Yeah, and
Um,
and part of it was some of the people viewed it as, because when they were looking at what books, specifically like prophecy books, like which ones to include, one of their criteria was, well, did this prophecy come true? Like, and was it, should it have come true by that point? And like,
yeah,
they're like, all right, if it did come true, all right, put it in. But that's one of the reasons they wanted to leave it out, because the way they saw it is like, okay, this book made prophecies that didn't happen.
and then in some cases, like we wouldn't be able to tell if they happened because
Mhm.
they were vague.
Yeah, because it was prophesying things. So speaking of, Nero being the 666, the beast, like that's one of the things I just recently like learned was, apparently, some scholars are saying like what that was talking about, because Nero, he was terrible person, like guilty of all kinds of atrocities, particularly like against the Christians. Um, but they were actually, apparently there was a theory out there that he wasn't, when he died, he didn't actually die. He just went into hiding, but then he's gonna return, like, and raise all kinds of hecky dern and whatnot. But I don't know why I'm suddenly feeling like I need to keep it clean. But
I don't know.
it's, yeah,
Yeah,
interesting.
I
Develop
heard
it.
something.
Yeah.
Well, okay, two things. The first one, I wouldn't be surprised if one, and I can't remember if this is something I actually heard or if this is just my own idea. So I don't know which one it is. Um, with the kind of like the split over different groups of Christians thinking Revelation should be part of the canon and part of what would become the Bible. Um, it seemed to be kind of a divisive thing. So I wonder, and I wouldn't be surprised if it was included to avoid like major division.
Hmm.
Like, because the whole point of producing a canon was to kind of unify people around a single set of ideas, because there were like hundreds of gospels, like just written by everybody, and some of them were wacky. Um, like Jesus killing people or killing doves or something when he was little, because he's like, "Oops, I got all these power, womp womp," and like, uh,
Yeah. Weird
shit, I can't
stuff.
remember something
So
else now. Okay, I can't remember my second thing I was going to say, but I
yeah,
probably will.
yeah, that's okay. But yeah, so and as I was like doing a little more research slash watching YouTube videos while I was working today, one of the ideas I came across, was about why it was included has to do with something that happens with pretty much any kind of like apocalyptic like end times prophecy once it turns out to not be true because like what the what at least people have interpreted like Revelation as predicting was it's basically like John or whoever wrote it, they're seeing okay, like God's people are being like overtaken, destroyed by the Romans. Like, so God's clearly gonna come back and like kick some ass. It's gonna be like Day of the Lord, apocalyptic type
Yeah.
judgy stuff all over their asses. And but then, but then, like as they're looking back on the book, it's like, that didn't happen. In fact, Rome kind of just became Christian. It was kind of almost like the opposite of them
Yeah.
being destroyed by Christianity. They kind of adopted it, and it just kind of became the thing.
Which is
But
when it became especially dangerous.
well, not destroyed by Christianity, but destroyed by God. And like,
Yeah.
yeah, God didn't destroy them. He apparently just adopted them. I don't know, but
State
so then,
sponsored religion, Americans, you don't want it.
yeah, well, it
Every
always
time it's happened, it's been the big awful.
it's literally why we started this country because we apparently why we started it.
Yeah, because like the king was God, he was the
Yeah,
mouthpiece of God, and
yeah.
we already
So
had one of those. That was the Pope.
yeah, so yeah, God can't have two mouths, but
Why can't he have all the mouths? Like all of the mouths,
we
because
have
he has.
postulated earlier, going back to the 3BG podcast days, that he may have just had all the genitalia, so why not all the mouths? I think
Yeah,
they
I feel like
were
that theme came back
fertility
recently
belts.
too.
Yeah, probably. But so I guess, and I can't remember who it was, but when they were discussing like Revelations, like it seems like I saw this failed prophecy. This some dude, again, I can't remember who it was. Again, did the thing that always happens with these failed end times prophecies. Like, well, maybe we misinterpreted it. It was maybe it's really just some sort of like spiritual reality, like some sort of spiritual second coming kind of thing. Because that's always what happens. Is like going back to
But
like the Millerites or whoever, like to say, oh, the world is ending on this day, and like that day comes and nothing happens. Like, oh, well, really, what it meant, it wasn't like an actual end of the world. It was something in like the spiritual realms, like, and that's exactly like whether it's like preterism or full preterism or partial preterism, like that's how like much of like Christianity is viewing like these prophecies, whether it's Revelation or what Jesus was saying about like people still around here will still be alive when all this happens. And it's like, well, nothing like that seemed to happen. It's like, oh, it must have been this other thing that we didn't think it really was. Yeah,
yeah, but
that's
then
how.
like, but
Yeah.
then it's happened to me too. But like you latch on to the new idea, and then but you don't question the new idea.
Hmm.
The old thing that you found convincing, like turned out to be wrong, and
Yeah.
and so
Hmm.
you're yeah okay you misunderstood, you got that wrong. But then like you're like you latch on to the new thing, but you don't ask yourself, is that new thing garbage too?
Well, yeah, it's the cognitive dissonance. It's like this thing that you believed like wholeheartedly and were so sure was going to happen, and then it didn't. So instead of saying, "Well, I guess that was just wrong," you got to say, "Oh, well, I must have misunderstood it." So, because like the two main things when it comes to these prophecies is um, the events, like what's actually going to happen, and the timing. And this is something that like occurred to me today is you have like your two camps. You have your like preterists who like people aren't familiar with that term. It's basically that's the idea that all these things and all these prophecies they actually did happen, but they're just not what we thought they were. Like it wasn't end of the world type stuff. It was like the coming. It was the starting of the church. It was the coming of the Holy Spirit. It was like all this other stuff, or
and
they thought happened.
and those kind of poetic meanings, like I do see value in that. But if you're going to go that route, then you kind of have to like say, kind of like look at where you came from and be like, all right, maybe all that stuff is poetic too, and or wrong, and um, you know what I mean? Like,
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. So those people like they take serious the timing of like when people like Jesus said like all these things will happen like while some standing here are still alive. It's like well, so they take the timing part seriously and say, well, because this again goes back to like presuppositionalism. Like you start with the assumption, like, well, Jesus can't be wrong, but he clearly said all these things were going to happen like in the lifetime of people who were there. So it's basically okay. So that means they say, okay, well, let's look at what did happen in their lifetime, and okay, that must be what it's talking about.
So
But
if
then,
Jesus is fully human and fully God, then like Jesus can be wrong because he's fully human, but he's fully God. So even when he's wrong, he's right in some way.
yeah, but and this is a whole other thing. I would love to do just a full episode. Or this might we could probably do multiple episodes like just on Jesus and how like his views
Which
because like
one? There's four versions, and then
yeah,
Paul's, which is
and
like
they
a
all
vision.
yeah, and it's like and they all basically if you track it like Jesus basically becomes God at different points depending on who you're reading. Like I think Paul said he became God and Lord and Christ at the resurrection. Like there's
Yeah, to
others. Like I
Paul,
think
like
it was. I want to
Jesus
say it
is
was
more of an idea.
yeah, and I want to say it was Mark where it was at the baptism,
Yep.
and then I think like Luke and Matthew more emphasized at his birth.
Yeah.
Like when and then but John was like, no, fuck that, always,
Always
always and
screw
forever.
the logical problems with that, and that God
Yeah.
had to then sacrifice himself to appease himself, because
Mhm.
apparently the only way to appease his hatred towards humanity, which is made in his image, so the only way to appease his self-hatred is to kill himself, but he can't really die, so
Mhm.
that didn't take, and he came back from the dead, even though he wasn't really dead, but now he's fine. God is fine because like he hurt himself enough that he doesn't have to hurt us anymore. And my goodness, isn't this who we want to be like?
Apparently, but so yeah, so
God's like all the mental health problems in one.
yeah,
You
like
know?
every single one, he like just ticks all the boxes.
Yeah.
I don't know if, yeah, like I said, we'll go into more of that later. But so when it comes to like even like specifically like the kind of like end times, second coming, day of the Lord, like
You said coming.
I did. We're going to be saying that a lot. I, but
God's a pervert. Second coming involved horses and shit.
and whatever gets you to come twice. I mean, those are
I mean, if you're God, I guess it might take a lot. So, I mean, maybe
yeah.
he needed to like he needed the S and M of the flood. You know, like thousands of years before that. That was
Yeah.
like foreplay for.
It's like, what's it going to take for you to what's it going to take for you to come a second time? It's like we're going to need horses and a lot of blood.
I'm gonna need a wine press. I'm gonna need a giant Jesus, and it's like, why do you need a picture of yourself in 3D to come again? Like,
And also this is key. Put a sword in my mouth.
sure, because you can't say your safe word with a sword in your mouth. I don't.
It's like he's he's ball gags are like not nearly as not extreme enough for him. I guess like we
Sure,
need the
sure.
sword.
Yeah.
So so when it comes to Jesus making these kinds of prophecies about day of the Lord, like it's gonna be coming, just like me. While all of you are still, well, at least some of you are still alive, which that's weird. It's like he's comfortable. Okay, I was about to do like a necrophilia joke, but I don't know if I want to go there. But
Well, you should. Or like we no algorithm is labeling this as something it supports. Like
yeah, so basically, apparently, for Jesus to come again, he only needed some of them to be alive.
right.
Like some of you can be dead; it doesn't matter.
Apparently there's some magic fraction for that.
Yeah, yeah, it's like dead or alive doesn't matter. Open up. But anyway, so that just broke my brain. Uh, all right, so Jesus making these prophecies about the end of the world. It's like, so you gotta basically, like I said, it comes to the events and the timing, and like different camps like will like reinterpret like some. So like you have the camp like the full preterist who say, okay, well the timing, like he was very clear on that. So the events we must have been wrong on. But then you got the other end, and this is more
Hmm.
like what I grew up in. It's like, no, this is like going to be real, like judgment, violent, bloody,
Yeah.
second coming type of stuff. But we were just wrong on the timing. So like there was actually literally like this is actually a legit theory out there that some people think that at least the apostle John and maybe some of the others that were Jesus was talking to, they're like, oh, some of those people are just still alive. They're just like in hiding or something
You
somewhere.
know,
Like that is like an actual theory out there.
that is where all right. Uh
While you talk, I'm getting another beer. So,
Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. That was
oh
the
yeah,
that was the disciple John guarding the Grail supposedly. Did
oh
you know
really?
that?
I
Yeah.
did not.
No, yeah, that was pretty sure that that popped in my head as a real thing. I really hope that's not this the I really hope that's not the cartridge and the Hop Juju talking. But I'm
I'm
almost positive I
sure.
heard that somewhere because Spielberg did use
Yeah. And now that you mention it, that sounds
even in the one
familiar
with
from
the
shows.
aliens where Indiana
Yeah,
Jones and the aliens of the
yeah,
Crystal
the Crystal
Skull or some
Skull.
shit.
Hmm.
Shia LaBeouf. He was actually a decent actor.
Hmm. Yeah,
Didn't take his medicine apparently.
that's happens to the best of us.
Yeah.
But yeah, so so what I grew up in, and maybe this is something we can also talk about, just like our past experiences and
Hmm.
like our views of Revelation. But so I guess I'll say like from me growing up, let's see if I can remember the terminology. We were pre-tribulation, um,
Pre-trib.
pre-trib. Like as far as like
Tribbing is
we were
something
also.
different in other contexts. I don't know if you know that.
I do not.
Oh, okay.
Do you want to share the context or?
It's one of the ways two people with JJs will have sex with each other.
Oh,
And I don't know if tribbing is an offensive term. It probably is.
all right.
Because
So,
I am. It may or may not be. I don't know. If it is, I am sorry. Let me know in the comments.
mhm, yep.
uh, yeah, it's slang. So sorry. That's all I have. That's all I. It's the only word I have for it. So if there's
Well,
different words, let me know. If I shouldn't
mhm,
say the words at all, just let me know that too.
mhm, mhm. Yeah. See, we're all learning here. So, so we were.
But you mean pre-tribulation? So before the big struggles and the death and the murders and
Yeah, and I don't remember if pre-tribulation, if that referred to just the time period where we are now, or also where the rapture is happening. Because I remember there was a theory like the rapture happening mid-tribulation, but we were definitely no rapture is what kicks
yeah,
off the tribulation because like we can't be around for any of that shit. That's the whole point of the rapture is God saving us from all that stuff. And then there will be like the 1,000-year reign, and then the white throne judgment, and and all that. Which, funny aside on all that, because I was told, and I don't even know if this second judgment that being mentioned is actually in the Bible. So there's like the white throne judgment, which is basically God like throwing everyone into hell who, you
God's on
know,
his racist
well,
throne, right?
yeah, right, right. Throwing all the black sheep into hell, um,
Oh my goodness!
and the goats. Yeah.
No, but
So
the goats were supposedly in context in that scripture. The goats were supposedly established Christians, right?
maybe I don't remember, but I learned about there was this apparently the second judgment, which is all like the positive judgment, where like all the Christians were going to go to, where basically Jesus saying, "Here's how awesome you are. Here, like I judge you as amazing and have all the blessings." But that was apparently called. Remember one of my pastors calling it the Bemis seat
The
judgment. I have no
Bemis.
Yeah, I have no idea where this came from. All I know is I found it hilarious because at the time in our home we had a toilet and the brand of the toilet was Bemis. So it's
No,
like, oh, it's a Bemis seat.
that's a real brand. How much you want to bet? How much you want to bet? That was on purpose because
Yeah.
it's been called the throne forever.
Yeah, but that's the, it's also a white throne. So
Yeah,
it's like both judgments all in one. Every time I took a
I
shit,
think
it was
my
fantastic.
grandparents' toilet was a Bemis.
Hmm. Yeah.
It was fancy looking. Like the
Well, I
bowl
mean,
wasn't just an oval; it like went back into like another curve and met up with
yeah.
the tank. The tank was part of the whole thing.
Oh yeah. I mean, only the finest. So,
Yeah,
so yeah. So yeah. So that's what I grew up with, and like so basically, the rapture being a big part of it. Which, side note, the rapture actually, the word rapture shows up zero places in the entire Bible, and like
it means being taken up or something, right?
yeah.
Like yoinked up.
Hmm. Yeah, and there's a couple passages where like the idea
It was the
like what
big
it's
yoink
based.
before the second coming. The big yank before the second coming.
Well, I mean, if you want him to come twice, you got to yank it pretty bigly.
I think
So,
so.
so only makes sense.
God's complicated. He needs two different thrones and like
It's like so complicated to get him to come again. You sure he's not female?
sure he's not impotent. The
uh,
reason why his robe, the reason why his robe
well,
like was all over the floor of the temple because he fucking limp. That's why.
I mean, he is old, so I mean,
he's he's the
yeah,
oldest and the youngest. So
yeah, oh, yeah.
does that mean he has like a schizophrenic penis? He's like sometimes he's the youngest and sometimes it's like everything in between.
Well, honestly, I mean, if anyone has a schizophrenic penis, it's got to be Jesus. But
Yeah,
yeah,
that man has a lot of baggage.
most of it is his penis. So yeah, so that's
This calls for mellow corn.
yay. So yeah, so like for me growing up, like yeah, so the whole like second coming, like we all got to be ready, and like,
Gotta be ready.
but and this is something that like the Book of Revelation, like if you take it like its original context, like or any of these like apocalyptic prophecies, like it's very much okay. The end is coming. Like everything's got to be like sorted out now. So it's a very like us and them mentality. So
Yes.
that's why, especially in America, a lot of the evangelical church, like they do still have a very us versus them mentality. It's like there's
Yep.
us and there's the world, or there's us and there's the wicked people, or there's us or the people who remind that lady of Nineveh for whatever the fuck reason. So it was so like growing up, like I went to church, I went to a Christian school, and there were like no kids in my neighborhood. So like I only had Christian friends basically like all the way through high school. And like I was, and even like once I got to college, like I wouldn't say I was like afraid of like non-Christian people, but even mostly subconsciously, but I'd say even sometimes even consciously, just the thought of like, oh, I'd like me like a friendship with non-believers just isn't going to work out, so I'm not really going to try too hard. Like I didn't like avoid or treat people roughly. I just didn't try to build any friendships for the most part with unsafe people, at least for a while. But yeah.
I think like I realized that I was doing that recently with Christians like from the old prayer tent group,
Mm.
like people that I probably would have connected with again, just to like hang out.
Hmm.
But so I was kind of like wondering, okay, did I just assume that like we wouldn't get along anymore, or what is it that like the spiritual warfare thing is just such a part of everything that crowd does that like there is no just hanging out.
Mm. Yeah.
um, that very well might be, uh, and that sucks because honestly, like I didn't really hang out with that many people. It was always in the context of spiritual warfare stuff.
Yeah.
at least in that group.
Hmm.
And I kind of want to get to know him now, like apart from that. But yeah, it is kind of a thing. Like maybe it wouldn't have like for you at the time worked. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, it is kind of weird how we just assume that it's not.
Yeah. But yeah, but I mean, and it wasn't just like the revelation stuff, but yeah, just in general, like the climate I grew up in, like with Christianity, it was very, yeah, like us in the world, like we're supposed to be separate, like kind of
So,
thing. And but if
gotta be
you are
salt and
having a
light.
relation, what's that?
Gotta be salt and light, but not a
Yeah.
pillar of salt because pillars of
Yeah.
salt are
Well,
bad.
well, now, like, and this, like, I just thought of this. The other aspect of that is like, so I didn't grow up thinking that having relationships with non Christians was wrong, but if you did, there was an agenda.
Yeah,
So basically, if you're getting to know unsaved people, it's so that you can get them to be saved. So, but me as like the introvert, I'm like, I don't want any part of that because that means like talking to people about deep stuff where there's disagreement. So
yeah.
this was like all the things that I struggled with, like talking and conflict and all this stuff. Like it was just like several kinds of nope. So I was like, nope, no thanks. I'm just gonna stick with my Christian buddies and where I feel safe. And yeah. So
I
how about you? Like what was or what were you about to
glad
say?
you asked because I was about to start talking about that.
Oh, good. Yeah. So, what was your relationship with Revelation as a growing up Christian type person?
All right, so I grew up Catholic, and to be honest, like Catholics really don't talk about it. Like, uh, it's
Probably
kind
for
of
the best.
like, sure, you can think that if you want. Like, you can think that's how the end of the world's gonna go, and you could also not. And both things are cool. And they're,
Oh, actually, that reminds me of something. So, in my Christian high school, it was Protestant, but it was a Christian high school. But I remember I had one friend. There were some Catholics who went there, but not very many. But I had this one friend who was Catholic, and I remember he was actually brought up even like by one of the Bible teachers as when we were talking about like the Book of Revelation as end times prophecies. Like, oh, by the like, and we were like, oh yeah, it's all about the end times, and he's like, actually, some people don't believe that, and he wasn't saying this as like a
mhm.
broaden your minds inclusion kind of thing. It was more like these weird people. Like so, this guy, like he's like this one student, he's Catholic, so they don't think it's about the end times. And we're like, oh, he's like several kinds of messed up now. So that was a fun memory.
I think the official Catholic stance is we don't know. Like,
Hmm, that's respectable.
like it could be useful, it could not be. There just isn't enough information there to make a choice. Um, so something I was going to say before I get to
Hmm.
more of my experience with Revelation is because I might forget to say this again. Uh, one of the main problems that Christians had with Revelation being included in the canon was that the 1,000 years of prosperity was described in pretty decadent terms, and that was not something Jesus taught. Like
Mm.
it's pretty clear that if anything, Jesus taught giving up your money was good.
Hmm.
Having lots of money is it's that definitely appears to not be good. Like reveling in your prosperity, which is what the 1,000 years of peace sounds like as it's described in
Hmm.
Revelation. There are a lot of Christians who are like, well, clearly that can't be Jesus because that's not how he was, based on the stories they had. Um, so I had never heard that before today when I was listening to some stuff about Revelation. I thought that was really interesting. Like,
Mm.
but so yeah, growing up Catholic, not really a thing. Um, eventually, I went like later, like mid college. I don't remember. So I was college age, and I ended
Hmm.
up going to a branch of the International House of Prayer, which is based out of Kansas City. There's a
Hmm.
Cincinnati House of Prayer called C-Hop. And yes, yes, the original is called IHOP.
So they don't call it chop. I'm disappointed.
No, C-Hop. Um, and that was kind of an end times charismatic Pentecostal-ish kind of para-church organization. Wasn't a church, but it was definitely like a church-like ministry. and they had this worship dance thing where you would do dances that Messianic Jewish people would do, which were based on historical Jewish dances that Jewish people do to this day as like a worship thing.
Mm.
Because it was a charismatic organization, the way we did it there was like definitely more fluid and like, how do you feel? Move that way, kind of thing. But this is how the steps go, uh,
Uh-huh.
and so everybody's doing roughly the same thing in a circle, and it was actually like a cool meditative thing. But this place had classes about how to be prepared for the end times, and like it was like prepping. It was for preppers who aren't crazy. We're the good kind of preppers, and
Right, right.
uh, I never really got into that. I thought it was interesting. I looked into it a little bit, but then there was just so much that was vague about it that it seemed like a waste of time. Also, Bible said when Jesus comes back, it's going to be a surprise. So, but that is itself kind of a logical puzzle problem because if you tell somebody there's going to be a surprise, it's not a surprise anymore. But when he comes, it's going to be a surprise. But you've told us it can't be a surprise. But it will be a surprise. Like,
Yeah.
so you've just told me it's not happening.
Yeah. Like expect it and be ready, but it's a surprise.
And then when I got into that prayer thing at the giant camp for men, and that
Mm.
eventually I got you into,
Yeah.
you would
Thanks.
think that would be an end timesy crowd,
Yeah. Hmm.
but it wasn't.
Some
There,
some some of them definitely were.
oh yeah, so no,
But
like individuals in there definitely were end timesy crowd people.
mhm.
They often had additional teachings in our little like chat things when we were taking breaks, and they'd say something like, "No, I was told that like when you like pray in Jesus' name, you have to say in the name of Jesus of Nazareth because there's some demons named Jesus too, and if you don't say of Nazareth," and I was like, I'm thinking, what if there are two Jesuses in Nazareth? It was probably like
Yeah.
wasn't it like a Yosef or
It was a Yeshua.
Yeshua? That's what it
Typically
was,
Joshua. Yeah,
which was a common name.
yeah.
Right. So there might have been three Yeshuas in
Oh yeah, there
Nazareth.
were absolutely more Yeshuas from Nazareth. I guarantee it. Yeah.
So I was kind of like, all right, that falls apart because there's only one Jesus of Nazareth, and secondly, like that demon sounds more legalistic than God in that scenario, and then I had somebody say once, well, yeah, demons are legalistic, and that's why like they can't do certain things if you do a thing. I'm like, also that sounds like witchcraft.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the prayer time people, like on the whole, at least as an organization, para organization within that church, they were not end timesy, and I think the reason why it was not part of that group as like uh, as a culture or as like a like part of being in it was that I think the guy who started it, who was in charge of it the first time before it became a repetitive thing at each of those camps, he saw the end times prophecy stuff as kind of like divination because you're
Mm,
trying to find the secret in the writings, and
mhm.
uh, so then I was kind of like, yeah, okay, it does sound like divination a little bit because you're trying to read the tea leaves of the Bible, and um, but then I remember thinking that isn't listening to the Holy Spirit like in that kind of prayer context, isn't that also a kind of divination? You're like, what is in this person's future? How do I like cooperate with that? What does God have for this person's future? How do I facilitate that or make it happen? Sometimes was the vibe.
Mm. Mhm.
Um, because I'm pinch hitting for God.
Yeah, he's got to sit this one out, take a break.
Yeah,
He's focused on pitching. He can't, you know.
he's got a bum penis. He's preparing to come again. He's on the DL, the disabled list.
Oh, jeez. Uh, okay, so I had like another topic I wanted to get to, unless there was
Sure.
anything else on the like disabled Jesus penis front that you were wanting to.
No, that's just that's kind of how I got like nearly talked into end time stuff and then convinced out of
Uh,
it. Uh,
yeah, well,
yeah.
good for you because this is something I found out recently. When I was looking into like the topic of like religious trauma and like
Hmm.
different aspects of Christianity specifically that like caused the most trauma. See, I would always thought like just like the concept of hell was going to be like top of the list, and it's up there. But apparently, like with the studies that they've done, actually the number one like aspect of Christianity that's causing like the most trauma and anxiety is the rapture. Like people thinking about that,
Oh, it's just
which
because
now
it's.
it's connected to hell, so it's still like kind of a part of it, but just that specifically, I was like, I found that fascinating.
I guess that seems more real
Yeah.
because you know what this reality is like, so you can imagine the reality where like half the people that you love are just suddenly, from your perspective, dead.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Yeah.
that yeah, I had heard stories of kids who grew up with the rapture and as an idea that they were completely into. I did
Well, yeah.
now I did believe for a little bit that there probably would be an end of the world and it might be something like Revelation, and then I I kind of looked at it like it was a repeating scenario, like the problems with Rome, with the dominating power that's like abusive and uh, good slash bad for humanity. Um, that maybe it's not the end of the world. It's like an apocalyptic scenario that repeats. Like you have an empire get into power that causes lots of problems, and then the empire falls, and that kind of thing.
Hmm.
Um, like right now, America is an empire, and I think our foreign policy right now is trying to manage our decline. They're like, yeah, this is happening. It's just going to happen. Um, so let's walk back all of the bravado that we've had for.
For reals. Yeah. 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 Would have been nice to, I guess, not grow up with all that. So it's maybe a bit of a thing I'm a little envious of you about. But yeah, because honestly, like, I mean, the whole like idea of the rapture didn't necessarily cause me that much issue. For me, it was really more the concept of like, am I going to hell? Like, I know,
Yeah,
like I don't know how many different times like growing up I prayed the prayer of salvation just to make sure I got it right, and yeah, that definitely screwed me up.
in
But
kind of
so
in a similar way, like one of the things about Catholicism is that like it institutionalizes hell in the present, like or it institutionalizes purgatory in the present because there's like guilt is a big like
mm-hmm.
Catholic thing, like
Mm-hmm.
needing to feel bad, needing other people to feel bad when they've done something wrong,
Yeah.
punishing people. I kind of wonder if like the whole concept of hell wasn't created just to make people comfortable with forgiveness, because like forgiving someone and they never get their due, like, well, now I don't want to forgive them because I'm letting them off the hook. I'm the last line of defense on them getting their due.
But or so it's like saying like, what's like I can forgive them because they're going to burn in hell, so it's all right.
Right, it's all a wash.
That's several kinds of fucked up, but
So yeah, with like the Catholic guilt in the present, and like you're never doing enough, and like, and I guess kind of the evangelical side would be like you're never doing enough because it's gonna suck later. Like, you know what I mean? But like when you're Catholic, you're not doing enough, and so it sucks now. Like everything's your fault, that kind of thing. Uh, yeah.
yeah,
No, so Catholics have their own. things. In some ways, I think it's because it kind of becomes part of the culture of the family, even more so when it's not
Uh,
an especially religious family in Catholicism. That can be a different kind of challenging because then if you deconstruct or deconvert, then you're not. Some of that stuff is so ingrained in your family background that just pulling out their religion doesn't also pull out that too. It you're
mm,
like in my personal reflections, I just didn't automatically attribute that to religion stuff. So when I pulled out the religion stuff, that was still left, which is also super hard when you're autistic too, because like you already think your problems are your fault. Yeah, that's a separate soapbox.
yeah, that's
Like, why are the neurodivergent people? Why are they the ones that have to like modify their behavior to fit in with everybody else? Why don't we meet in the middle? You know?
yeah. Or maybe it's all the people we call neurotypical. They're actually diverging.
Yeah,
So,
they can only pay attention to a certain part of what's happening in their brain. Like, we can pay attention to multiple parts. We also can't control it. Like, suddenly I become especially aware that I can hear this one sound sometimes. And it's like, and
mhm.
it's just like, now that sound must die because that's all I can think about.
Oh yeah, totally, totally. Yeah. All right. So yeah. So bringing it back to like Revelation, like the prophecies and like apocalypticism in the Bible in general. So what one? Sorry, I'm having a moment where my brain is wanting to talk about like five different things at once, and I can't decide. So
I've got one mouth.
okay.
Yeah.
Um. So yeah. So okay. Well, here's the concept that's at the top of the pile currently. So this whole concept of predicting the day of the Lord. It's like
Okay.
all the apocalypticism is supposed to be predicting. One of my favorite quotes I've heard is like with the people who try to explain away, like I guess this is more towards the people who think like the timing of okay, this was happening in Jesus's lifetime and Paul's lifetime, whoever, but they try to explain away. Okay, well maybe the whole like day of the Lord apocalypse thing really wasn't what we thought. So the full preterism view,
Yeah.
which I like to refer to full preterism as maybe the real apocalypse was the friends we made along the way.
Oh man, I want that on a T-shirt, and I don't know what kind of graphic that'll be.
Yeah,
I
but
kind of
yeah,
think
it's
like
that
a
whole.
child in like a Day of the Dead mask or something.
But yeah, because another quote I heard was like because usually when you think this goes back to like something that even like Paul was like trying to combat in like some of his writings. He's like that verse. I want to say, or maybe it was Peter. I don't remember which letter it was in, but that idea of like, oh, people are saying like they're complaining and kind of like mocking this whole idea of like the incoming, like, well, everything's still going on as it has every day since the beginning of creation. Like nothing's changed. It's like because that idea, the way I can't remember who said it,
That
but
person doesn't know about history.
yeah, but no, but I mean like it's like, but I mean, just in general, things are still going on. Because the way I
Yeah.
heard someone put it, I wish I could remember who, but they basically said, okay, the day after the day of the Lord should look nothing like the day before the day of the Lord. So if the world still seems like it's going on just like it has, then it's like it kind of looks like it didn't happen. So that's where the whole like preterism explanation. Oh well, it was really more of like a spiritual second coming, and this is like so they'll like link it to things like the Pentecost or like the start of the church or
Or
the
how
coming
like
of
the
the Spirit or
presence
what.
of Christ
Yeah.
in every believer is that kind of that like that poetic one that did like I was kind of like, oh, that's even cooler. But then that's
Hmm.
not what Jesus was talking about.
Yeah, I mean, because like literally, you read like any, especially like in the Old Testament, any description of the day of the Lord or the coming of the Lord or like the judgment, like it's like very real, like catastrophic shit like happening.
Yeah,
You think so? And this is something I also think about when 'cause this it's this very weird like switch that happens like in the Bible, like in the transition from Old Testament to New Testament, particularly in like how it views like the Jewish people and like these super like devout Jewish people. Like in the Old Testament, like those are the heroes. But then as
yeah,
soon as it flips to the New Testament, they're suddenly the villains because they're doing things like, well, the Messiah that they were expecting, like Jesus didn't really fit that. But we're supposed to be told, like, well, Jesus really was like the Messiah that the Jews were expecting. Well, if he was really the Messiah that the Jews were expecting, and he actually was fulfilling all these prophecies, then why didn't they recognize it? Maybe because he wasn't actually matching all the descriptions of all the prophecies and whatever. So there's a reason they didn't think he was the Messiah because, like in the Old Testament, it's like the Messiah was supposed to be like literally like a military ruler. He was going to like literally free them from their actual oppressors, which in like in the case of when Jesus came was Rome.
at that
So
point it was Rome, but
that,
before that it was Babylon and the Assyrians and
mhm,
like um,
yeah,
now I think that's interesting. You said that all of a sudden in the New Testament they're the villains, and I think like taking like if you take an outsider view of the Old Testament, like the genocides and all the like the ruthless shit that the Hebrews did, like you could easily classify that as villain behavior. But
mm,
the thing is, every culture that's lasted long enough to have history about it has had its villainous moments, and
mhm,
like everybody, I think everybody is either the hero in their own story or the chief victim.
no, yeah,
uh, it kind of like if you see your story as a tragedy, then your hero is the chief victim. But if you know what I mean,
mm,
um,
yeah,
so the Hebrew people saw themselves as the heroes. These stories aren't even real. I mean, there's they were probably a They were the Hebrew people were probably an overlap between uh, Egyptian migrants and not Palestinian. What Phoenician from the Phoenician area and Egypt, like in between where the overlap was, that's where the Israelites started to come into play, and then like they kind of created stories where like the people from the north were the bad guys and the people from the south were the bad guys, but us in the middle were the awesome people. But that's where they came from, and it was kind of like a way to distinguish themselves from um, the areas that dominated them, just because they were the bigger kingdoms. Uh, the, the Jewish people were like the
right.
backwater people neither kingdom wanted. uh,
Oh, for sure, yeah,
no, so like, yeah, there's a lot of heinous stuff in the Old Testament, and then there's New Testament principles. That had the New Testament been around long enough for it to be taken to its logical like extremes, it would have become terrible also, and it did. Um, yeah, it's like people want to be good, or they have that particular idea of what good is, and they project that into like a religion or something, but it's not attainable. I think it would be way better for people, including myself, to just say, okay, stop thinking about like who I want to be, because that's something my brain made up, like, or my past made up. And so, who am I really? Let's just all be who we are really, instead of trying to be our ideal, which is some like projected mental survival thing.
yeah,
Like, because in a way, it's true. Nobody cannot be themselves. Like you can't grow past yourself.
yeah,
You can be a healthier version of yourself, but no one that when they're born again becomes a completely different person. I don't know how many times I heard that, but it's bullshit. Sometimes, maybe for a little bit, you become a healthier person, um, but then you kind of become toxic. Sometimes,
Yeah. Then I mean, we also see like whatever kind of change you see in a person when they become like born again and like Christianity. Like you see the same kind of changes in people who like convert to like Islam or Buddhism or
oh yeah, yeah. No,
yeah,
the research really shows that it's
yeah.
it's the. I was talking to ChatGPT recently, and
Oh, good times.
I was like, design for me like a super religion. Like what are like all the like what does research say are the best components of religions? And it turns out that it isn't a particular religion at all that has the best outcomes. It's particular kinds of practices, regardless of the religion,
Hmm.
and it's all of the
Interesting.
healthy people stuff. Like it's all like
Hmm.
forgiveness, acceptance, group support, like um, rituals of some kind that reinforce positive things in your life, um, all that kind of stuff. And so, yeah, like religion, like the methods are a way for us to support our own mental and emotional health. And then when we start putting detailed stories around shit and try to turn it into a science that's like that has a backstory, that's when we fuck it up.
Mm-hmm.
And I think part of that is just our brains like projecting things, and we human beings in general have a sense of justice, like an innate sense of justice. It changes across cultures, but there is still kind of a like a need for things not to go unanswered. I think you can spin that positively and say that like no good things should go unanswered,
Yeah.
and that's justice. And forget about the punishment because that doesn't even accomplish what you want it to.
Hmm.
Uh, there's research for that, but yeah, I
Yeah.
yeah, I think like the ultimate God's in the sky punishing things, and it's out of a human need that instead of really wrestling with it, we like projected a story onto the universe.
Yeah. Which I mean, and like finding a story, finding meaning. I mean, that's something that human beings like we're just kind of wired to do. But I think
Yeah,
that's at the root of a lot of these like various takes on end times prophecies, apocalypticism, like how like current events are mirroring the Bible. Like they're like we're always looking for the signs,
it's
essentially.
like because guess what? Who's in current events? Humans. Guess who wrote the Bible? Humans. Like,
And guess what kinds of things the humans who wrote the Bible said would be happening in the end times? Bad things. Oh, and guess what's always happening? Bad things. So that's why, like, literally, like every time looks like the end times, and here's something that all end times prophecies so far have in common. You know what that one thing they have in common is?
horses. I don't know.
They've all been wrong.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
At least when it comes to people saying like the end times are now and the world is ending at this point. Like they've always been wrong. So this, going back to the whole like various ways that people try to reinterpret like the biblical like end times apocalyptic prophecies, whether it's we either got the timing wrong or we got the events wrong. Like one of the ways that I've probably one of my favorite ways I've heard such like methods referred to. It was actually by Derek from the YouTube channel Myth Vision. He referred to it as trying to save the savior, because like
Mm,
if Jesus was making these prophecies, that if you just take him at his word, where like if you look at what he actually says in the gospels, he says like in these days, like while some of you people listening to me are still alive, the
yeah,
second coming, the day of the Lord, the judgment, it's happening. It's like okay, like it didn't happen. So now, like again, this is the presuppositionalism. Like, well, Jesus can't be wrong, so we have to figure out why he was right. Instead of which is the opposite way that you're supposed to look at things like this. And honestly, it's the opposite way that any Christian would look at any kind of prophecy from any other religion. Like you would just read it plainly and say, okay, what did they say would happen? When did they say it would happen? That didn't happen. That's why this religion is wrong. But when they look at their own religion, the idea is like, well, it can't be wrong. So now we got to figure out why it was actually right. And yeah,
Yeah,
that's, I mean, whether it's the apocalypticism or really that's just apologetics in general. Like, like apologetics, it isn't, and I wish I could take credit for this, but I also can't remember where I heard the idea. Like, apologetics is not about trying to find the truth. It's about taking what you already believe and trying to find ways to make it true. Is
yeah.
essentially,
It's like trying to make it okay
yeah,
to keep believing what you believe in the face of
hmm,
evidence to the contrary.
yeah, yeah. Because I mean, and again, this is something I would love to get into more, like when we talk about like Jesus more in depth. But I mean, if you look at like what's written about him, like the things he said, like my impression of Jesus was like he was just another like one of many like first century Jewish apocalyptic prophets, failed apocalyptic prophets.
There was
And
something about what he taught that made it stick around, and I kind of wonder if that was the. I mean, it got used differently, but I think I wonder, kind of wonder if it was the "my kingdom is not of this world" concept, and the forgiveness, regardless of
yeah,
like there. But I kind of think it maybe stuck around because there were enough parts of it that were part of being a good human. Uh,
yeah,
like it continued to have value, but then like it's totally possible to
yeah,
be an even better human. Leaving that behind, I would think.
yeah. And like an illustration I kind of like think about, it's like and it's one of those things like in it's not necessarily fully developed. Like in my mind it makes sense, but I haven't quite found a way to make all the connections to make it like fully analogous, at least in any kind of way I could explain for it to make sense. But when you talk about like, okay, why did this particular apocalyptic preacher and like why did his following, like why was that the one that took off?
Yeah,
It's like, well, when
dumb
you think
luck.
about it, like there were like so many of these, like one of them had to be the most popular. So maybe it was like if you think of like in so many things, it's like I guess the illustration I think of is like a dam where like the water level can keep like rising and rising and rising, but like as soon as it gets to a certain level, if it's above the dam, then it's just going to start flowing. So
Yeah.
it's like as soon as like the dam breaks, then it's all like so it's like in order for something to become like the overwhelming favorite, like it, it's not necessarily there was something necessarily like that special about it. It just
Hmm.
happened to be the first one to reach a certain threshold at which it's like the floodgates just opened and it just took off. Like, does that make any kind of sense?
Yeah. No, and I was also just thinking about how. So there was a story about a guy called the Egyptian, and
Mhm.
the thing about so so the story in the Gospels about Peter cutting off somebody's ear and Jesus heals the ear, and there are a lot of similarities between that and the story of this guy called the Egyptian. His real name isn't in history anywhere, but he was
Mhm.
recorded as being called the Egyptian. And the thing about like Jesus fleeing to Egypt with his family, coming out of Egypt, uh, there are enough similarities, and the fact that like the story about the Egyptian with the sword and the ear and all that kind of stuff. I don't know if there was an ear, but there was something like that in the Egyptian story. Uh, that like the motifs actually work better in the Egyptian story than in the garden, and you're like, oh, this makes more sense that this thing happened if they were trying to shoehorn in like this other person's story, because you're like cut off an ear and Jesus healed it. He's like boop and all, and then it's like moving on. It's like that wasn't.
Yeah.
a big part of anything that it was happening elsewhere in the rest of that scene.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of wondering if maybe part of the reason why the Jesus story survived is because the teachings of Jesus weren't just the teachings of Jesus. It was kind of an amalgamation of these apocalyptic preacher teachings that survived to the point
Mm.
of the Gospels being written. They're like, okay, here's all the positive stuff that survived up until now. Jesus is still the most popular, so let's just like combine everything into into this one character because it's not really out of character for Jesus to have said this. And these were also good things a lot of people think is from God. So let's put them all into the Son of God character. And like maybe there was some scientific method going into building the Jesus character, and that's why it survived this long.
Mm.
Because I actually kind of like that angle because maybe the
Yeah.
scientific method went into building the Jesus character, what worked, what hasn't, and and now you have a faith that if you want to be fundamentalist in it, you have to be like poo poo on the scientific method, and
Yeah. It was ironic. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, in a way, it was maybe like naturally selected.
yeah,
Yeah. For its various attributes. Yeah.
I mean, speaking of natural selection, there's that part in Revelation. Back to that topic,
Mm. Oh, yeah.
where sure you could rationalize away some of the stuff for Jesus is like uh, squishing dying people like grapes in a wine press, and he's making blood wine, and uh,
Hmm.
you could say, oh, you know, it didn't, maybe it didn't exactly say Jesus was doing that. They're talking about Jesus, and then this also happened. Like maybe that was somebody else doing that. Okay, fine. No, but but then there's that part where Jesus Christ throws Jezebel on a bed where men come in and then they have their way with her. Nothing is said about whether she consents, but it's something about like then God does something that kills her children and plagues the men or something, and
Hmm.
like no,
Yeah.
that's still the Jesus character facilitating gang rape.
Yeah.
That's not okay, and
Hmm.
and if you are a fundamentalist and you're like the Bible is true cover to cover, and it's all God and it's all Jesus, then you have to be on board with this picture and say this is good and this is justice. Now you could say, "Oh, Jezebel is metaphorical in this, and it's metaphorical gang rape," and like, okay, that's metaphorically awful.
Yeah. Yeah. 'Cause that's the thing. Like when people say things like, well, yeah, yeah, the Bible says all this stuff, but it's just using it as a metaphor. It's like, well, that's a pretty fucked up metaphor. Because, like, what would you think of a person who in real life was like, if they're just trying to make a metaphor for something, but they're using gang rape
And
as
it's
their
in the
metaphor?
context of prophecy, so
Yeah, it's like,
like which
I
most
don't care
people take
what,
literally.
like, I don't care what you're talking about. If your chosen metaphor is gang rape, like, that is fucked up. like,
It's
there's
like,
no, oh, it's
but it's
just a
not
metaphor.
bad
It's
when
like,
God does
find
it.
a different fucking metaphor.
No, but it's funny because it's
Yeah.
not bad when God does it. The only, according to William Lane Craig, the only thing that makes it bad is that God didn't tell them to do it. In this case, it's fine because God said, "Yeah." We assume God said, "Yeah, do that," because God is Jesus in this case. And
Yeah. Yeah.
it's like, how do you? It's like, tell me you're an awful person without telling me you're an awful person.
Yeah, like
That's what that.
seriously, look it up. Like for people, if you want to like have your day completely ruined, look up various interviews of William Lane Craig talking about like the problem of evil and like the Canaanite genocide in the Old Testament. Like I think the most recent example, he did an interview with Alex O'Connor on YouTube,
Which is
where like
tremendous.
it's like he literally said like in the stories of like when God was like ordering like the Israelites to basically commit genocide against the Canaanites to like clear them out of the land and they're like slaughtering like women and children and like all these like innocent people And William Lane Craig, he's like, I actually went through and I thought about it and like who was being wronged in this scenario. And the only people I could come up with was the Israelite soldiers who were having to commit all these horrible crimes. They were the ones who were being wronged. I'm like, are you fucking kidding me?
And he
Like
said
he
that it
said that
was actually
completely.
like good for the children to be murdered of the Canaanites because they were saved from a life of possible suffering and instead went straight to heaven. And it's like, cool, but they didn't have a choice in that. Like, what about free will?
Yeah.
Like, they did not have
And
a
also,
choice in
like,
that.
so why are you against abortion then?
And like, no, no, abortion is only wrong if God didn't say to abort.
Yeah, yeah. So
So, like, God can
that's
abort all the children He wants, and but if He
Mhm.
tells you to abort a child, that's fine.
Because divine command theory, right?
But God's morality is not subjective, right? It's objective. Even
Right.
though it's only wrong because He said it's wrong, which is kind of the definition of
Yeah.
subjective.
Exactly. So, like I said, so if you want to have your day ruined, if it hasn't been ruined already, yeah, look that up.
But also in
But
that scenario, God doesn't have free will, right? Because God can't violate His own character. But He gave humans free will, right? So then, do we have more free will than God? Well, we're
well,
made
because
in
we can,
God's image, so we really don't have free will
yeah,
because
well,
we can't.
apparently we can violate the way we were created to be.
Right, but then do we have more free will than God?
Apparently,
Then that makes us God. But if
mm,
somebody is given free will without their consent, is it still free will? Because I didn't consent to be given free will
yeah,
if I have it.
yeah. There's so many reasons free will actually doesn't make sense. But yeah, this is like several other topics. So to bring it back, since we're coming up on almost 2 hours here, any other thoughts on like the revelation? Are we in the end times? So something I wanted, even though I just asked you what you thought, I was about to launch into my thoughts, but I'll stop. So sorry. Go.
And I think what only thing came to mind for me was I'm playing with some screws that are on my desk, so I'm sure it's making noise. I'm gonna stop. Um,
It sounds like a good time.
no, I don't even know what they're for. Little mechanical screws.
Then all of a sudden your chair falls apart.
I I think it's always the end times, and I think it's always the Genesis times because
Hmm.
anytime something new starts, something before it had to die or dissolve or whatever. So it's like, yeah, like the world is always ending and it's always being fixed. Like there's always good things and bad things happening. To kind of like if you're in like Ukraine right now, there's certain parts of Ukraine that look like the world has ended. like there's whole cities that are just gone. They're just rubble now. Um, so then you go to places that are super peaceful. I don't know, like a vacation spot somewhere, and it's like, no, the world's totally fine. In fact, it looks like it's just going to get better from here on out. Um,
There was a little thumbs up bubble that popped
so
up.
yeah, it is always it like yes, the world is ending, but it's always on the verge of ending. Like
Yeah.
we're one good asteroid away from the world being over, and we that's not anybody's fault on this planet. So
Hmm.
that
Yeah.
there is an asteroid that's going to come that's going to go very close to Earth. It's going to go between the moon and the Earth, which is kind of freaky because we're like the moon's pretty close.
Yeah.
This is
Yeah.
going to go like right between us. The scientists say it's going to go in this like keyhole spot right between us, where like it's not going to get tugged on so much by either the Earth or the moon. It's just going to keep right on trucking, uh, which gives us plenty of time until the next time it might hit us. We can develop rockets to steer it away. It's called Apophis, which I think is the god of chaos.
Oh, yeah.
That was named by the people who discovered it. Uh,
Nice.
yeah, so like, there's plenty of stuff that can end the world, and like none of it would Like, okay, climate change not going to end the world, right? Going to make it I kind of broken, at least from our perspective, for a while.
Hmm.
But the Earth will continue, and so will people. The only things that could like wipe out the whole planet, like on a scientific level, like actual evidence kind of level, would
Hmm.
be something like we get knocked out of our orbit by something like comet or an asteroid or something that's big enough to just kill everything on the Earth. And even that asteroid Apophis would only kill half of us. So you know, that's just like a ladies' team mulligan. It's not.
No, but you know what else could end the entire world and destroy all of us?
What?
Butt stuff.
Sure.
Hmm.
In fact, depending on who you talk to, it is. Never mind, so many of God's people who preach in front of crowds are into butt stuff. That's what
Hmm.
happens when you repress everything.
Yep, it's got to go somewhere.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Why is
So
it the
yeah,
butt? Why is it the butt? Like, why is that where it has to go?
I don't know.
What?
Like,
And why are we always like, yeah, take that and shove it up your ass? Like, why is shoving it up your ass like? I mean, sure,
and
that's
and 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 if God's the one who designed our anatomy, why did He put a G spot in our anus or up
in
our ass? Where?
everybody's anus.
Yeah,
Apparently, not like regardless of your birth sex, like it's there. That's just weird.
yeah.
That's
Like,
either like really poor planning or great planning. I don't know which one it is.
it's great planning, but poor explanation
Yeah,
of how it's supposed to work. But yeah, so as we're maybe wrapping up, I don't know.
is that
So
why it
just,
feels good to poop? I had to say
you
it.
did, you did, and I'm glad you did. Yes, yes, and amen. Um,
Poop in
but
the
yeah,
woods,
so
everybody. If you haven't pooped in the woods ever, poop in the woods.
hmm.
Like yeah, it's one of those experiences where you're like, this is really wrong. Wait, no, everything's perfect.
Yep, yep, yep. Yeah. So just like a couple closing thoughts from me, just like in general, and I think this is stuff that kind of applies to interpreting like supposed biblical like end times prophecies and like because people will like kind of like try to cross reference, so they'll talk about like Revelation and they'll try to link stuff to Daniel and they'll link stuff to like Paul's letters and link stuff to things that Jesus said. Like one of my favorite quotes about biblical interpretation, and he wasn't talking about this issue necessarily, but I think it applies like across the board. Dr. James Tabor, he was more talking about like the different gospels and how like different stories in the gospels are told different ways and how like we try to harmonize them.
Yeah,
It kind of like really like destroys like because like the reason all these stories were told differently is because the different authors were trying to make different points. So what I love, so then when it comes to people trying to like read something in Revelation and say, "Oh, this must have been what Daniel was talking about when he talked about like the 7 years or
must have
whatever,"
been.
or when Paul was talking about meeting the Lord in the air, this must have been like. So what Dr. Tabor said, and I love this. This is one of my favorite things ever said about biblical interpretation. Harmonization is the enemy of the truth. So if you're trying, if So yeah, so I think one of the biggest mistakes that someone can make when approaching the Bible is just assuming that it's univocal, assuming that there's a continuity, assuming that it's all connected, that it's all really saying the same things. Like no, it's like all these different authors, like they're all making different points, and we just kind of after the fact have like kind of squished it all together and assumed, oh, this is God's word and this is what He wants us all to know, so it must all be in agreement and saying the same thing. But in reality, like it's really not. Like so, when people say there are contradictions in Scripture, like it's not like how most Christians say, well, this just means it's something to wrestle with and try to harmonize it. Like no, they're contradictions because they're contradictions because the authors are just literally saying different things. So if you're reading something in Revelation and saying, "Well, this must be what Daniel was talking about," then you're completely ruining like what Daniel was actually trying to get at. And or if you read something, well, this part of what Paul says about what Jesus said, that sounds different. So, like, well, if it sounds different, it's because it is different. And if you're trying to make them work together, then you're losing both of them as far as like what they're really trying to get at.
And with the Gospels, when I was looking through Mark, which I do want to get back to, just because it's really well written.
Yeah.
It's kind of a harmonizing in its own way, but not really. Okay, so it's a combination of Greek philosophy ideas, some Greek theology ideas, and Hebrew theology ideas, and then some of like kind of the burgeoning Christian ideas. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
the way it's written is it's to kind of bring out the truth in all of those. Um, and then there's just like parts of it like where the seed falling on like the four different kinds of soil, three or four different kinds of soil,
Mm-hmm.
and then Jesus said that you have to understand this parable in order to understand any parable he teaches. It's kind of like, okay, that's the answer key to the rest of the book of Mark. And that's why that's the only parable that Jesus actually gives answers to in that story, is because the writer wants you to use that to apply it to the rest of it. And it's like, it kind of turns the rest of the book of Mark into a magic eye picture, where you got to like look a certain way and now
Mm-hmm.
you can see it. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and when I did that, there were a lot of humanist ideas in Mark. Um, so much so that, like, let's say AI evaluates all the Gospels at some point, and it's like uh, Mark clearly was espousing humanist ideas in these various religious contexts, or using these theologies. I'd be like, oh yeah, totally, because they were like, because it was basically kind of like there was a lot of parts of it that were kind of like how to be a person. Like, if you have something that you know to be healthy that you're sharing with someone, and based on how they respond, here's how you respond, and this is it's a good outcome for both of you, kind of thing. But if you try to like shoehorn all of the gospels together, then what each all the intricacies of what each author was trying to do, um, and all the time and effort that went into their writing, not now you just fuck it all up by like trying to make it fit a particular theology or this unified story. Um, and each one of the writers of the Gospels were extremely talented. Like,
Mm-hmm.
to be able to like weave together like various and like they all kind of did this, like various cultures in into a into a language that wasn't the original for at least a couple of them. Like, that takes some talent. And yeah, I got more out of the Bible stuff when I was reading it as literature.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Like, there's a lot of stuff that like you're just not taught in church contexts, that
Mm-hmm.
has a lot of depth to it. And like, even for people who like want to stay Christian, who are Christian, I think it's still totally worthwhile to look into some Bible as literature information.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I have some recommendations that we'll get to before we wrap up, so don't let me forget. Um, but yeah, I mean, I guess my kind of like closing thoughts on the whole matter. Like, first of all, Keith, I hope we kind of answered whatever questions you had. But if not, yeah, feel free to reach out, whether in the comments or yeah, direct message me or the page. Or okay, I'm going to try a thing here I've never done before, where I'm like trying to add a caption because apparently can't do comments because we're pre-recording. But all right, let's see if this shows up. There we go. If you have any sort of like recommendation for something you would like us to discuss, you can let us know several ways. Like this is our email. It's not gmail.com. So
That's on brand for the evening.
it is, but I like it. Yeah, don't send it there.
No, yeah, but that's even spelled incorrectly. For
Yeah,
the slang.
yeah. Well, I've seen it spelled both ways, but
I've seen it swing both ways.
no, actually, that's how I saw it spelled in the like instructions for condoms that I purchased at one point. That's actually how it's
Really?
spelled. Yeah.
It's those
Anyway,
Chinese people writing instructions.
so anyway, if you have something you would like to hear us talk about other than you know Jesus orgasming, or if that's what you want to hear us talk about,
That's
um,
probably going to pop up again. That's what she
yeah.
said.
Oh yeah, definitely. But yeah, there's multiple ways you can let us know. This is our email address for the show. You can send show suggestions or any kind of email, any kind of message you want to send us. You can comment here on the episode. You can send Facebook Messenger messages to the page, comment on YouTube where we're at, or you can just find either of our personal pages on Facebook. Either way, yeah, whatever way that you can get a hold of us, let us know what you would like to hear us talk about. So again, Keith, I hope we at least somewhat answer your questions. If
I, I,
not, yeah, let me
I
know.
will say to Keith. So like when I was looking at, so like we can kind of accidentally self-select for information. Like when we're looking for information about Revelation and prophecies,
Mm,
like it's much easier to get information about, because Google knows us and so does YouTube. Um, like
hmm
we'll get information that kind of supports what we already think, and it's really helpful to also go look at things that might refute, or that are intentionally refuting um, revelation being prophecy, because then you can really kind of look at the evidence and say which one of these makes more sense to me, like which one looks more like it's what's happening to me. And when the reason why I say to me instead of like what's actually happening is because we really only have our own perspective. uh, like we can't get outside of our own experience, and so that's what it comes down to. Like even if we say I'm going to give it up to the Holy Spirit or something and let the Holy Spirit decide for me, it's still our interpretation, our experience of what the Holy Spirit is doing. um, so cut out the middleman and I guess, and just say like what what have I experienced is true. Like which one of these comports with my experience of reality. uh, yeah, and hopefully that gets a more um, if I just more information is good. More information
hmm Yeah,
rounds out our perspectives.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah. So I would say my to kind of like sum up my thoughts on the whole idea of so-called end time prophecies in the Bible and whether or not they match up with current events, and it's basically it all comes down to like my view of Jesus is again, I want to get into this more in a future episode where we talk like just about Jesus in general. Like my view of him, like very briefly, is like I see him as a real historical character, like real historical person, but I just see him as just another first century apocalyptic prophet, specifically failed apocalyptic prophet, like they all are. And if you look at the various justifications of why what he said isn't really what he meant. Like it's just like any other, you know, end times doomsday cult basically that we've seen all throughout history. And like anytime they make a prediction and then when they try to backtrack and reevaluate, like it's all the same things that like his followers have been doing about everything that he says. I mean, and if you are skeptical about like whether Jesus was really like an apocalyptic prophet, I mean, one way I've heard it explained is like, okay, look at the who was his immediate predecessor and who was his like immediate follower. Okay, you have John the Baptist, Paul. They were both apocalyptic preachers essentially. So
Hmm.
what's so if the guy who preceded him and the guy who immediately followed him were apocalyptic, then he probably was too. So yeah, so I mean, yeah, just the way I've seen the way people try to reinterpret, reimagine, whatever you want to call it, like say like, well, no, it really wasn't wrong. Like it looks just like any other failed apocalyptic prophecy that we've seen throughout history. I mean, and yeah, I mean, it's one of those things like once you see it, you can't really unsee it. It's yeah.
Yeah,
So again, so I guess to wrap up my thoughts and like is like things like Revelation or like the prophecies from Jesus or Paul or Daniel or whoever, like were they trying to predict the end times? Like, yeah, but if so, then they were just wrong. And any attempts to kind of try to reconcile all those wrong prophecies, I mean, yeah, it's it's all just very ad hoc. Yeah,
yeah.
cognitive dissonance attempts to resolve cognitive dissonance around the whole thing. Yeah,
And anything helpful that they taught doesn't mean that they have exclusive rights to what's helpful. Uh,
mm-hmm.
because like
No,
even wrong people get things right sometimes.
oh yeah,
Uh,
broken clock, blind squirrels, and all that.
yeah, and in our culture, like having an emotional attachment to the idea of Jesus or the character of Jesus, it just makes a lot of sense. Like a lot of people have that,
Yeah,
and that also doesn't mean um, that Jesus is the only way. And
right,
we'll get into this later, but it's also not clear that he even said that. In fact, he may have said something much more inclusive.
right, right.
Cliffhanger.
All right, yeah. So yeah, so thank you so much, Keith, for reaching out with that suggestion. I think that led to a lot of good stuff. But before we go, speaking of things that I kind of did to prep for the show, one
What
thing
did you do?
in specific, I specifically wanted to call out this channel on YouTube, Myth Vision.
Mm-hmm.
So this is like I just did a search for. If you just go to YouTube,
YouTube.
and just search
YouTube.
Myth Vision Revelation. Like this is like a bunch of stuff I've been watching like recently, like stuff from Bart Ehrman about how like Jesus in Revelation is actually kind of a dick. Elaine Pagel's fantastic interviews. Well, a lot of her. Oh, Richard C. Miller. This guy is fantastic. He's someone's been very influential in some of like the thinking that I've had about like how to view
Yeah.
like the Gospels and whatever. So yeah, but just in general, like if people aren't familiar with the channel Myth Vision, like the guy like who runs it, Derek, like I'm kind of so on like some of the videos where he does where it's just him. I'm like, it's okay. But one of the main draws of the channel is like he talks to so many like experts and scholars, like on just about any topic involving the Bible you can think of. So yeah, can't recommend the channel Myth Vision
Yeah.
highly
And
enough.
the information is top notch, even if like him or his personality doesn't jive with you. Like he is passionate about all these topics, and I think he's a former construction worker or something. He's a former contractor,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and so like this was his hobby, and now he basically should have an honorary master's from
Oh yeah,
any reputable.
yeah. I mean, I feel like
Yeah,
I almost should just from watching his channel. But yeah, so much good stuff on his channel. Like I said, that's the draw. Like that's what he does. Like almost all the episodes is like him just talking to scholars and experts on because he's wanting to learn all this stuff too. So he's like, all right, I'll share this with everyone else. And like, yeah, I'm really like eye opening stuff
was
on
it
that channel.
Stavropoulou? Is that her name?
Oh, Francesca Stavrakopoulou. Yeah.
Yeah, her stuff is great.
Oh yeah. With her, what was the name of her book? Like God and Anatomy or something like
Yes.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, I highly recommend the audiobook version because it's read by her, and she has kind of a sultry voice. Um,
Hmm.
so it's like it's easy listening, but
Yeah.
also it's hysterical when she reads her own writing about God's genitals. Like there's believe it or not, in the Old Testament, in the OT, there is so much about God's genitals, and
Oh
that like
hell
we
yeah.
don't learn about in church because it's weird. And to have her make these kind of like British innuendos about things.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, because
so
she's
she's
British.
like, yeah, she's Greek by way of the UK.
Hmm.
uh, so yeah, it's um, no, it's a really good time because you kind of hear like her cheeky tone in the way she says something, and you're like, man, you're really just messing with like any fundamentalist who is like trying to hang on for this chapter, and you're just like trying to give them every reason to like, stop reading,
Uh,
but without doing it on like clearly on purpose, you know.
hmm. Hmm. Yeah. All right. All right. Well, so that's I think we solved the end times.
I think we did. They're not going to happen. At least we won't know it before it happens. It'll be like,
Yeah.
well, I'll be dead afterwards. It'll be like, well, shit, that happened.
Yeah. All right. So
You're
yeah.
like, that was fucked up for a minute.
Thanks to my buddy Keith for the conversation topic recommendation. I thought it was really good. So yeah, please, like again, in case you didn't catch or didn't notice, like this, we're pre-recording. We're pre-recording this episode. This is our very first non-live live
Because Tommy's
stream.
got to be a
So
parent tomorrow and shit.
I know, friggin' kids and wanting my
No,
time and
that's I
stuff.
no. Actually, it's yeah. Tommy knows I don't mean that. But for anybody
Oh yeah,
listening, yeah,
of
like
course.
no,
Yeah,
totally perfect.
yeah. Oh yeah. I'm sure they know that, but but yeah, but like I said, we'll be this will be when this is streamed. Me and Matt will try to jump on and like see the comments if you people are leaving any comments, like whether it's tomorrow when this is streaming or just any other time afterwards, whenever you are catching this. So, and if you and again, like I had the email address up earlier, or however you want to get a hold of us, if you have something you want to hear us talk about, let us know. We'd love to talk about it. But yeah, thanks again, Keith. This was a fun conversation. This was we went a lot of places, and I still feel like there's things I could talk about that we didn't get to, but
Yeah,
we've been going long enough, I think. So, all right. Any
and
closing thoughts or?
yeah, totally give us topics, people, because eventually we're
Mhm.
gonna run out of things, and then we're just gonna do what we always do when we talk is like eventually just start rehashing old topics.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
And what would be really great is like if you not only give us a topic, but if you would actually like to come on the show and discuss that topic with us. We are
yeah,
always
yeah,
cool for
just
that.
say where you're
So,
coming from,
yeah.
like what kind of
Yeah.
questions you have for us, as if we're like answer people. No, just if you just want to know what we think about that, because
Yeah.
we want to know what you think about that. Like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Or yeah. So yeah, and we love talking with other people. Like so we've had a couple guests. We've had plans for more guests in the future as well. But like if you just want to be on the show, yeah, definitely reach out, talk to us. We'll see, and yeah, try to make it work out.
I did hear rumors about maybe we might be doing an MST3K
Mm.
style commentary with someone else of church services, and
Oh yeah,
that sounds like a good time.
one of our former guests, Mr. Derek Day, had this idea, and so yeah, this
No,
sounds.
that it's a winner. Yeah,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
especially
Again,
if we can like black ourselves out and just make us silhouettes.
uh, I wish. Yeah, we'll see what we can do, but yeah, yeah. So yeah, stay tuned for that, and we'll be doing more. Probably doing more reaction videos in general. So, yeah, so again, if you have a video that you would like us to react to see what our thoughts on, send
Oh
those as
yeah,
well. So, so yeah. So anyway, but before this goes on too long, because it hasn't already, any other parting words, or you want to hit us with that benediction
let's
before we're
let's
out?
let's benedict it. May your things and stuff be forever with your people.
Yep. All right.
Bemis.
You go judge on that white throne. All right. Good night, everybody. We'll see you next time.